I've been away for over a year at this point, so what better way to make my comeback than with a very relevant video on a game that everybody stopped talking about exactly 2 days after it released several months ago. A game that definitely sunk a development studio and looks as though it will also sink at least one Square Enix CEO. I'm talking of course about Forspoken. There are definitely some positives here. Overall, I'd say it's really not that bad, but it is flawed. I think the most charitable way to sum it up as a game is that it's confused and a little undercooked. There's some good ideas with poor execution, bad ideas with even worse execution, and some pretty decent ideas done pretty well. This is the part where I'd normally say something like, at its core, Forspoken is but I really don't know what Forspoken was supposed to be at its core. It's an open world game that doesn't really need to be one, it's a story driven game with comparatively little actual story, and it's almost like a 3D collectathon as well, I guess. I think at its core, Forspoken is an upper management checklist of things that needed to be included that was handed to the developers at Luminous Studios as a last-ditch effort to justify the continued existence of the in-house Luminous engine. Circling back to my joke at the beginning, Forspoken obviously is not the reason behind the likely toppling of Square Enix CEO Yusuke Matsuda. This game has often been labelled as Matsuda's pet project or something that he was really behind, but I think the reality is that, as CEO, he felt the need to get a return on the investment that was the Luminous engine. Their own engine, which was developed at large expense over many years, that was supposed to power their next generation of games, but it seemingly just turned into a massive headache for the company. Kingdom Hearts 3 was originally being developed on Luminous. Its first reveal was even on Luminous, but it was dropped for being too difficult to work with. Final Fantasy XV's long and troubled development cycle cannot solely be attributed to the Luminous engine, but it was certainly a contributing factor, especially in the later stages of development. The one thing I personally noticed a lot in Final Fantasy XV was how not suited the engine was to open world game design, and it was apparently a pretty big challenge to make it work, so it seems like a bizarre decision to go full steam ahead and make Forspoken yet another open world game. Against all odds though, the open world itself, in terms of environment and landscapes and the way you traverse it, is actually great. Movement is one of the big highlights of Forspoken, but they forgot something pretty important, and that is an actual reason for the open world to exist. The world of Athia is enormous and beautiful, at least on PC with the settings maxed, and traversing this magical landscape is a breeze, but there is just nothing compelling in it. There are basically no mysteries to discover, there's nothing interesting to find, there is just no reason at all to explore, so it really begs the question of why is there an open world at all? Sure, there are little icons scattered all over the map that represent various activities, but also listed right there with those icons is the exact reward you'll get from completing those activities. If you no longer need cloaks or necklaces, for example, and this will happen pretty quick because the true power comes from upgrading these gear pieces rather than obtaining new ones, then all of the cloak and necklace icons on the map may as well not exist. And you will be looking for any reason to avoid doing these activities because at the end of the day, they are all exactly the same. Some might say scout the area, some might even seem like there's a puzzle involved, but almost all the icons on the open world boil down to one thing: kill the enemies. There are 3 icons which barely qualify as activities, and they are monuments, photo spots, and cat statues. At photo spots, you take a photo. At monuments, you walk up, you shoot the gunk off them, and it gives you a stat boost. And cat statues will spawn a cat which you slowly approach and pet. This used to simply mean that they'd be inside refuges, which are like little rest stops, but in the latest update they also appear alongside you while out in the world sometimes. Other than visually being there though, they appear to offer nothing of actual value, so it's just a straight up collectible. Everything else you see on the map is just some variation of kill the enemies please, walk into cave, kill the enemies, walk into building, kill the enemies, walk into ruins, kill the enemies, dive into secret lair, walk through linear hallways, kill the enemies, then kill the big enemy. I want to explore you, Forspoken, I really do. You've given me all the tools I need to zip around, you've given me a big, beautiful world, but it has all the depth of a muddy puddle. Actually, a muddy puddle is too deep for this analogy. Forspoken's open world is so lacking in depth that it goes back the other way. It goes up. It has all the depth of a step ladder. The lack of depth extends to other areas of the game, particularly the crafting and loot. Pretty much everything you find in a chest is just some form of nondescript material, like a welkin bloom or a leaden garland or some crap like that, and really its only use is to upgrade the stats on your cloak and necklace. The different kinds of materials are either a material for a specific stat or just upgraded versions of the exact same materials. The only crafting you'll ever be doing is turning 3 welcome blooms into a welkin garland or some variation of that. At one point I did think this would change because I found a secret shop which sold an item that said it would allow me to craft gear, but after going through all the trouble to get the currency needed to buy it, it turns out it allows you to craft exactly one specific cloak and necklace. Now thematically they are homemade by Frey and they have that sort of theming, which is nice, but that is really the only true crafting you'll ever do. And all this just backs up what I said before about there being nothing interesting to discover in the open world. There really is just nothing to find. Every chest has a nondescript material, every reward is already explicitly labeled for you. There is just no reason to go out there other than it simply being fun to traverse the world, but that can only sustain your interest for so long. Likewise, even though the combat is good and pretty damn fun, with plenty of variety once you start unlocking the magic of the different Tantas, there is only so long that alone can keep you invested in playing, especially when seemingly everything you do is just some form of kill the enemies. It's funny that the thing I thought I'd be most disappointed in, the story and the dialogue, actually turned out to be okay. The banter between Frey and Cuff is really nowhere as annoying as it may seem at first. Some of it can be a bit cringy, but some of it can also be pretty funny. There is an option to reduce this banter, but I found playing with the default settings to be just fine. The story intrigued me at first, it did start to draw me in, but like every other aspect of this game, it just seems underdone. You start in New York City, where Frey is living a pretty tough life, but it isn't long before you find a shiny bracelet which sucks you into the world of Athia. Athia, of course, is even more dangerous and hostile to Frey than New York City is, so naturally she just wants to go back. In the early stages of the story, she is a deeply unlikable character, but it's mainly because she is just a flawed human being trying her best to deal with this impossible situation. The problem is that for the vast majority of the story, there is almost no character development for Frey at all. And then at the very last moment, in the dying breath of the rather short 15-ish hour story, she finally comes around and shows some compassion and completely changes her character in an instant. This should have been a natural progression over the entire length of the story, but what it feels like to me is that this story was supposed to be much longer. The longest section by far is the one that focuses on Tanta Sila, which is the first Tanta you find yourself in conflict with. It makes sense for her to not show much development through this first arc, but in the end, there is very little beyond this first arc. The next Tanta arc is much shorter, and the last one, which rolls straight into the final arc of the story as a whole, feels like it's over in less time than it takes Abe Simpson to humiliate himself.
How long was that?
I'm confident that at some point during development the story was massively cut down, and the result is that the players will almost certainly hate Frey for what feels like the entire game. At the end of the day, Forspoken needed better direction. It needed a solid focus. Scrap the open world, make it a much tighter story-driven experience. There would still be room to have the fun magic parkour traversal in smaller, more linear areas. Or forget the story, do something simpler on that front and really focus on making the open world fun to explore. Give it some meaning. Drop crafting altogether if you don't have time to give it any depth. It's just pointless the way it exists now. The things it does well, like the combat and the traversal, it absolutely nails, but everything else is spread far too thin to make Forspoken a truly compelling experience overall. It's not that bad, it's just not that good either. I've played for around 30 hours in total, and for probably 20 of those I was having some decent fun, but I really have no desire to go back. I mean, I might play through the story DLC which released recently, so if you want me to put myself through that, you can sound off in the comments. Other than that everyone, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. And I do mean that this time, it won't be another 18 months for my next video, promise.